Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and it's Billboard Breakdown. So it was a weird week. I wouldn't quite call it a bad week per se. Any chart where we get less future than expected, that's a net positive. But the new arrivals and the shifts reflect not quite a lull in the Hot 100, but where things aren't quite as stable as it might seem from the outside. And that's been common in 2017. There have been a lot of fluctuations the past couple of weeks. And with a big debut from Ed Sheeran coming up next week, I can definitely see that trend continuing. But overall, I'm okay with that. It keeps things kinetic to avoid the massive stallouts that did considerable damage in 2014 and 2016. And yeah, it makes these episodes longer, but you guys like that, right? Of course, part of this, and kind of a little bit ironic, is a question of our top 10, where, as expected, Shape of You by Ed Sheeran holds the number one for another week. I don't really see it getting knocked off the top either. The only category it doesn't dominate is streaming, and it's still ridiculously strong there anyhow. And the margins that it holds over Bad and Bougie by Migos and Lil Uzi Vert at number 2, they are considerable. Sure, that song rules streaming as a whole, but it's got nowhere near the sales or the YouTube or the airplay to be a serious challenger, and thank God for that. Similar sort of case for I Don't Want to Live Forever by Zayn and Taylor Swift at number 3. It's got radio, but it's kind of unstable right now, and it's losing in sales and streaming. If it faces a serious challenge, it's in big trouble, and we might just get that with That's What I Like by Bruno Mars still at number 4, which picked up a big boost thanks to his video, Called It, and gains pretty much across the board. It doesn't show any signs of slowing down here. It's narrowing that margin, but it's got competition from our first big new top 10 entry at number 5, Something Just Like This by the Chainsmokers and Coldplay. And the question here is whether or not this boost will last. I like the song. It picked up huge sales, streaming, YouTube. The only place it seems to be lagging right now is radio, but that'll be quick to recover and jump on the bandwagon. Then we got Love on the Brain by Rihanna rising up to number 6. And yeah, its airplay has been mostly stable, pretty much all it has at this point, but I reckon it went up more on Weaknesses of Paris by the Chainsmokers, which lost a fair amount of streaming and didn't pick up on the radio it needed to compensate, which left it at number 7. But this takes us to our second new top 10 entry, and the one that kind of blew my mind, Tunnel Vision by Kodak Black. Yes, it appears that cheap political provocation, when combined with how cheap below-average hip-hop can monopolize streaming these days with a good dance video, means that a song like this can blow up huge and hit the top 10, but what's telling is that the sales in radio aren't quite on board in the same way, which means that a track like this could have a short shelf life, or at least for God's sakes, I hope so. Now compare this to the success of Bounce Back by Big Sean that is still at number 9. Yeah, it's here thanks primarily to streaming, just like Tunnel Vision, but it actually has airplay to stabilize its lack of sales, and that stability contributes to real staying power. And on that topic, for which only the third time in history of the Hot 100, we got 3 songs from the same artist in the top 10 at the same time, and at number 10, it's Closer by the Chainsmokers featuring Halsey. They joined the August Company with the Beatles and the Bee Gees, and I'm sorry, no matter how you feel about the Chainsmokers, this just feels wrong on some level, especially when you consider that these got this spot thanks primarily to features. But to move on past existential threats to what popular culture thinks is worth attention and popularity are Losers and Dropouts. Now there are a few big ones here in the latter category. Broccoli by Drum featuring Lil Yachty, This Town by Niall Horan, and the much lesser Seein' Red by Dustin Lynch, left along with a bunch of other garbage not worth mentioning any further. Now our losers look like a much more interesting group, and let's start off with the songs that are naturally on their way out. A Guy with a Girl by Blake Shelton at 91, Love Me Now by John Legend at 88, and Star of the Show by Thomas Rhett down to 87. Then we have the expected loss for Future, with Draco plummeting off its debut to 64, Taking It Heavy by Linkin Park featuring Ciara with it down to 82, and unfortunately, Love by Lana Del Rey to 73. Then there are the sharp losses that came for both Black Beatles by Ray Shremmer and Gucci Mane down to 29, and Caroline by Aminé to 38, which I hypothesize seems to be driven by the shorter than average shelf life for a lot of modern hip hop that doesn't really cross over to the mainstream, along with Chantaje by Shakira and Maluma dipping down to 90. Finally, off its big boost last week, we have It Ain't Me by Kygo and Selena Gomez down to 22. But I've got every expectation it'll rebound now, that thanks to it starting to pick up a little bit of airplay. And that's good, by the way, because the song is actually pretty damn excellent. And on that note, our returning entry entries and gains. And let's start off with the welcome return of Redbone by Childish Gambino to 83. I expected just kind of rebounded to plug a gap, but it could have been driven off its prominence in Get Out's opening scene, given how unexpectedly well that movie has delivered, especially at the box office. But movies impacted the charts considerably, mostly driven by the Oscars. How Far I'll Go by Ollie Carvalho returned big to number 53, the cover by Alessia Cara surged up to 80, and in the rebound for a song that has never been able to die, Can't Stop the Feeling by Justin Timberlake went back to number 13. Now, I've already talked about our two new top 10 arrivals in this category, and off the video, Every Day by Ariana Grande and Future went up to 58, but I want to draw attention to Cash Me Outside by DJ Suede, the remix god, went up to 72, because apparently people are turning this into another hip-hop dance trend, give this plague-ridden abortion another shot at life, and absolutely nobody needs this. Well, okay, maybe things are starting to lower down the charts, maybe that will compensate for this. Starting with number 100, Green Light by Lorde. So okay, my initial prediction for Lorde's big comeback is that she'd likely gravitate towards more artistic, more oblique indie material. And instead, her big comeback was co-written with Jack Antonoff and is as blatant as a pop track you'd hear in the mainstream. Now granted, I'm not all that surprised. Given how much time she was hanging around with Taylor Swift, Charlie XCX, Carly Rae Jepsen, I can definitely see that as inspiring a pivot like this. And you know, if Lorde's gonna stay in pop, this is a pretty damn good shot of it. For one, it's kind of startling given how many people tried to mimic her unique vocals, how much of a distinct vocal presence she still is. Her husky rasp matching a level of visceral intensity in her delivery that easily compensates for her more limited range. And that level of venom that she adds to the song set to shred the guy who left her behind in her intense personality. And now Lorde, she's just impatiently waiting for the moment where her heart flips the switch and gets that green light to charge forward. And it kind of fits the instrumentation, despite how on the surface similar textures to modern pop proves how good production and melodic balance can make all the difference in the world. The prominent piano melody, it anchors the cloud of cooing backing vocals against the rounded beat, and while it might feel kind of melancholic on the verses, a little bit conventional, the pre-chorus kick into the tempo and the key makes the song so much more dynamic beyond the obvious loud soft, which roars up in the muted, distorted rumble of the guitar that seems to float over the outro to match Jack Antonoff's percussion. And sure, you could say that it sounds just like a mainstream pop song, but when you dig into the little details and realize this much of a cut above that it deserves a lot of real credit. I really enjoyed this. Looking forward to watch this duke it out with Ed Sheeran for the top spot next week, because it's got momentum behind it, and whoever wins, I think we all win the most. I like both songs. Happy to see it here. Number 96, Hometown Girl by Josh Turner.
With a ribbon tied back those waterfall curls, I've been looking all over the world for a pretty little homegrown hometown girl.
Well, this is a surprise. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I would somewhat include myself in that category, given that I drifted away from country for many of the years that this guy was big, Josh Turner first made a splash in 2003 and racked up a few solid hits based off of his rich baritone and a well-defined neo-traditional country sound. Now, I'll admit I was never really a huge fan of what I had heard, but that's more because I wasn't really listening to country around that time. He played much the same lane as Chris Young, and while some of his lyrics could kind of make me wince, his instrumentation and production was definitely in the right territory. And yet, unlike Chris Young, he effectively sat out the whole bro country boom, which wouldn't be a problem if MCA Nashville wasn't clearly pushing for hits from this guy, which delayed his album from 2014 to, well, now, thanks to this new single finally picking up a little bit of traction. And look, if it wasn't for Josh Turner's vocals, this would be nothing all that interesting about that song. It's not all that neo-traditional. The lyrics are exactly what you think they are for this sort of track, and while the electric electric guitars playing for some melody, that's welcome. This isn't something that Kip Moore, Lee Brice, or Dierks Bentley haven't done better, especially in the production, and especially with the more obviously synthetic percussion and backing vocals on the bridge and outro. Granted, it's not a bad tune, but without Turner fronting it, it would not be worth caring about in country radio. Just saying. Number 92, God, Your Mama, and Me by Florida Georgia Line featuring the Backstreet Boys.
Your mama and me, God, your mama and me, unconditionally, God, your mama and me.
I remember when I first heard this song when I was on vacation in Spain and setting up to review this album in short, and to this day, it baffles me that this exists. And this is coming from somebody who will admit to owning Backstreet Boys albums and seeing them live. Twice. So hearing their harmonies sitting behind Florida Georgia Line's obviously unrefined delivery and a load of unnecessary auto-tune just drives me off the wall. That's where you hear all the whooshing sound effects and the synth and the trap hi-hats hidden in the liquid cushion of electric guitar. Seriously, I own Backstreet Boys albums with more muscle and punch that something like this gutless and sterile as this is. And forget country, even on a pop vein, this is so limp, even for a sappy song directed at the kids they don't even have yet, coupled with really flimsy production. No, even as a Backstreet Boys fan, I can't support this. And considering that this is one of the better songs from Dig Your Roots, not a good sign. Number 89, Losing Control by Russ.
Losing control now, fighting the truth, trying to hide, but I think it's alright, girl. Yeah, I think it's alright, girl.
Like, I don't really remember liking Russ's last semi-hit when he was snapping at major labels with a decent amount of intensity despite being distributed by a major label, but I'm not gonna say that I remember the song at all. And yet, he's got a follow-up, one that's attracted a bit of attention for being an apology song for his girlfriend in more of an R&B vein, with very somber, dreary backing tones against the thin trap beat and echoing snap. And you know, despite how frail Russ's voice can feel, it actually kind of works for the sort of vulnerability that he's trying to capture, trying to get to the uncertainty of this girl's story about how after being cheated on and gaslit, she's struggling to find that trust again. And I'll actually give him points for placing himself in the position of that original bad guy. Although the entire song is in the third person, so again, it's not exactly being all that honest with the audience here regarding his intentions. Hell, it'd be very easy just to assume that he's just the second guy who's so sensitive and just checks her off her list and holds her together when she flips out. But again, by not placing himself in the story, it's very much a lonely girl learning to trust and fall in love again. And I'm sorry, there are entirely too many white guy with acoustic guitar songs that play in exactly this sort of mold from me to really get pulled in by this song. It's not bad, I guess, but it's guarded to the point where I really can't get invested in the story. Still, it's better than the last song, I'll give him that, even though that's not saying much. Number 78, Make Love by Gucci Mane and Nicki Minaj.
She say the money make her wanna make love. Wanna make love, love, love.
So, did you know that Gucci Mane is dropping another album this year? Better question, did you care, given that Gucci has shown little to no artistic growth or innovation in his flow or content over the past 10 albums and God knows how many mixtapes? Anyway, this is his new song, a collaboration with Nicki Minaj, where they both address some certain beefs that have been swirling around, with Gucci dismissing Waka Flocka Flame and talking about his upcoming wedding, although of course, he can still take your girl, and Nicki going after both Remy Ma and Azealia Banks. And here's the thing, anybody who takes Azealia Banks down several notches, that's alright in my books. But as a clapback at Remy Ma, I'm not all that impressed. Well, it's because Nicki continues to equate selling records as evidence that she won, conveniently ignoring that she went multi-platinum mostly through a string of sellout dance pop and not, actual bars. And sure, there are things to kind of like about this track here. The rumbling grime of the bass, at least initially, against the sparse tinkling melody, it's got some decent muscle, and a few lines, they aren't bad. But between all all Nicki's forced rhymes and corny as hell references, I got in the can, Dole, fuck ya, intercourse ya, Gucci trying and failing to croon his way through a hook, and flows that feel increasingly disjointed and clumsy, this is not an impressive response to that diss. In other words, probably would skip it. It's not really good. Number 48, Coming Out Strong by Future featuring The Weeknd.
Still coming out strong. Still coming out strong. Take my kindness for weakness. Still coming out strong. Still coming out strong. Still coming out.
So now we got one of two Future songs to have success this week. I know, less than I thought. Driven off the pop collaboration from his R&B flavored project Hendrix. Now, I was skeptical about this choice since I heard that he was dropping 2 records in 1 week, mostly because Future's forced auto-tune crooning, it's never really been a sound that I particularly liked, especially if he references his breakup with Cara, and guess what happens here? Now to be fair, I can at least see the parallel thanks to The Weeknd talking about the Bella Hadid split in between his bragging against the very bleak tones and trap beat, but it's not like Future has much to say beyond complaining that blogs are apparently writing fake stories about him, that he's fighting back and forth with his label head Rocco over contract disputes, and that he invented doors. And okay, we're supposed to find this interesting? Seriously, Future's whining in this vocal tone has always been his least attractive side as a performer, and The Weeknd playing everything so toned back is not a good look for him either. In other words, this is kind of mediocre and kind of shitty. Pass. Number 37, Selfish by Future featuring Rihanna.
Selfish, baby, tonight.
And of course, the biggest debut from Future comes with working with Rihanna for that pop crossover just like he did with Drake. And it's definitely different than any of his other recent singles, or hell, anything that Rihanna's doing right now too. Because between the glassy keys, the sparse beat, and the auto-tune trying to blend her voice with Future's on the hook, and failing, most because Future's upper register is painfully thin, it's got this oddly synthetic and mechanical feel that doesn't disguise how much of the vocal melody is cribbing from Every Breath You Take by The Police. And yet, if this is trying to be sensual, we're still forced to confront how out of his element Future is and sounds in the song, or how the lyrics are trying to emphasize a so bad it's good hookup that doesn't remotely fit with the very barren production. I'm not gonna say the song is quite as annoying as Coming Out Strong, but that's because I'm more confused at how fragmented and lacking any sort of coherent through line that this track is. It's a weird, underwritten little piece, and I honestly can't see it sticking around. But given how it's Rihanna and she apparently likes unfinished songs, you never know with this. Number 34, Slide by Calvin Harris featuring Frank Ocean and Migos.
Do you try on all your nights like this?
I might.
Put some spotlight on the side, and whatever comes through clear.
Okay, don't lie. When you saw the combination of these 3 artists, y'all did a double take. Mostly because I'm not quite sure I can pinpoint the cross-section between these 3. Calvin Harris, he makes bombastic if generic EDM, which I guess could work with Migos, bombastic but generic trap bangers. But how the hell do you factor in Frank Ocean, whose tonal choices don't even seem in the same universe as these guys? Well, okay, if you could imagine a possible intersection between all 3 of these acts, Slide would probably be it, with Calvin Harris providing a glossy, retro disco groove with guitar and piano that's actually surprisingly solid, and Quavo and Offset dropping pretty well-structured lyrics that coast on the groove pretty well, especially Offset, even if it is just shallow bragging, but what else would you get from these guys? Where I think I'm most disappointed is in Frank Ocean himself, mostly because when he's not pitching up his vocals into a pitched-up shout that I really didn't like, he sits with this low-key drone on the hook that doesn't really match any of the song's energy. And yet, I'm not gonna say that it doesn't work, kind of. It kind of fits this breezy, somewhat melancholic look at the party that made parts of Blonde work, especially with the realization that in the night, nobody gives a damn about owning of the image, which makes the questions of lingering connection under the spotlight kind of fascinating, especially when Migos embraces that spotlight regardless. In other words, I think I ended up liking this more than I expected. It's a bit of a weird song, but something about it kind of clicked for me. I don't mind it at all. Check it out if you're curious, it's not bad. And finally, number 28, Stay by Zedd and Alessia Cara.
It's time, the clock is ticking, so stay. All you have to do is wait a second. Your hands on mine. The clock is ticking, so stay.
If I was worried about a song this week, it was this one. Most because Zedd has a bad habit of finding pop starlets and getting them to make some ridiculously boring music that doesn't hold a candle to their solo work. Clarity with Foxes, Stay the Night with Hayley Williams, Break Free with Ariana Grande, I Want You to Know with Selena Gomez, Starving with Haley Steinfeld, even True Colors with Kesha wasn't up to her usual standards. And now we have Alessia Cara with her stepping in, and congratulations, we got Stay the Night Part 2, with Zedd trying to appropriate a half dozen different styles of modern production in order to grab our attention. I mean, the breezy sleigh bells and Kygo-esque piece of the second verse, that's the most obvious, but the whiplash transitions and touches of guitar pull more than a little bit from the Chainsmokers in recent songs. The overloaded breakdown and blend of vocals call to mind some of the most recent Labyrinth tracks, and not good ones. The humming vocal sample from Banks, that's very Kanye, and with the sharper snares reminding me more than a little bit of Major Lazer. And look, I don't blame Alessia Cara for any of this. She's trying to sing through a cloud of careening effects, none of which flatter her vocal tone all that well. Hell, she's probably the reason that I don't hate this song, which is just a total incoherent mess on a production level. I don't think it's that terrible, bizarrely enough, but what it represents more than anything is an utter desperation on Zedd's part. A recycled concept marred with too many styles that don't marry anything together all that unique. It's a total mess. Not precisely a bad mess, I'll admit. Again, I think I'm more amused than angry at this track, but still, it's not really good either, if I'm being bluntly honest. But as a whole, I didn't really mind this week. There are some bad songs. Coming Out Strong by Future and The Weeknd is the worst for me, only for wasting The Weeknd's talent. Although, if Make Love didn't have a decent beat, it'd be more of a contender than Dishonourable mention, thanks to a lot of bad bars from Nicki Minaj and Gucci Mane. As for the best, though, I'm actually giving honorable mention to Slide by Calvin Harris featuring Frank Ocean and Migos. It works for me, it grew on me, what can I say? With Lorde running away with the best of the week for Green Light. But coming up next, we got a big fight for the top spot. And while the best of Ed Sheeran have already debuted and they'll probably hold that top spot, it's not a bad album. Could lead to something interesting if Lorde really breaks up the top 10. But we'll see what happens then. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.